The transport ship's engines roared as it descended through the crimson atmosphere of Cadet 7. Sarah Mitchell sat in the deployment bay, checking her standard-issue survival kit one last time. Nutrient bars, water purifier, basic medical supplies, a knife, and a signal beacon for emergencies only. Nothing else. That was the rule for the final exam at Galaxy Defense Academy. Across from her, 3 alien cadets chatted casually. A towering reptilian from Thresh Prime, a floating crystal entity from the Luminara system, and a 4-armed warrior from the Ketheri homeworld. They all seemed relaxed. Sarah knew why. Their survival exams would last 72 hours on designated safe zones of the planet. Gather resources, build shelter, avoid the local wildlife, and wait for pickup. Humans always got different assignments. The ship's AI announced her drop zone. Sarah stood and walked to the deployment tube. The Ketheri cadet glanced at her with something that might have been pity. The reptilian just snorted. "Good luck, human," the crystal entity chimed in its musical voice. "Try not to die in the first hour." Sarah did not respond. She stepped into the tube and felt the familiar lurch as the system launched her toward the surface. Wind screamed past her deployment pod as it fell through the sky. She gripped the safety harness and counted seconds. At 500 meters, the thrusters fired, slowing her descent. At 50 meters, they cut out entirely and she hit the ground hard enough to rattle her teeth. The pod door hissed open. Sarah grabbed her pack and rolled out into the alien wilderness. Cadet 7 was a jungle world. Massive trees with purple bark stretched toward a sky painted in shades of orange and red. The air smelled like copper and rain. Strange calls echoed through the forest, some high and sharp, others low and rumbling. Sarah oriented herself using the sun's position and began moving toward higher ground. The academy instructors had given her coordinates for a cave system 3 kilometers north. Shelter first. Water second. Then she could think about the 72 hours ahead. She covered the first kilometer in 40 minutes, moving carefully through the undergrowth. The gravity here was slightly lighter than Earth standard, which helped. Her human endurance would be an advantage if she needed to travel long distances. Sarah found the cave entrance just as the first sun began to set. Cadet 7 had 2 suns, and the temperature would drop when both disappeared below the horizon. She explored the cave carefully, checking for signs of animal habitation. Empty. Good. She set up a basic camp near the entrance where she could see out but remain hidden from casual observation. As darkness fell, Sarah ate half a nutrient bar and drank sparingly from her canteen. She would find water tomorrow. For now, rest was the priority. She lay down on her thermal blanket and closed her eyes. Sleep did not come. Something felt wrong. Sarah had trained for 3 years at the academy. She had learned to trust her instincts. Her human ancestors had survived on Earth by recognizing danger before it arrived. That ancient awareness whispered warnings now. She sat up and listened. The jungle had gone quiet. No calls. No rustling. Just silence. Sarah stood and moved to the cave entrance, staying in shadow. She scanned the treeline with eyes adapted for pattern recognition. There. A disturbance in the foliage about 50 meters out. Too deliberate to be wind. Then another movement to the left. And another to the right. Her heart rate increased but remained controlled. She was being watched. Sarah backed deeper into the cave and pulled out her knife. She waited. Minutes passed. Then she heard it. A soft scraping sound on stone. Something was climbing the cliff face beside her cave. Something large. She pressed herself against the cave wall and held her breath. A shadow passed across the entrance. 6 legs, each ending in hooked claws. An insectoid body covered in chitinous armor that gleamed in the dim starlight. Its head swiveled, scanning the cave interior with compound eyes. Sarah remained perfectly still. The creature paused, seemed to sniff the air, then moved on. She waited 10 more minutes before emerging cautiously. The creature was gone, but Sarah's training kicked in immediately. She examined the cave entrance with her light on its lowest setting. Claw marks. Fresh ones. Deliberately placed where she would see them. And there, scratched into the stone beside her shelter, symbols in a language she recognized from academy databases. Galactic Standard. The universal language of hired hunters and bounty contracts. The message was simple. Prey located. Beginning hunt. Sarah's blood ran cold then hot. This was not a standard survival exam. Someone had hired hunters to kill her. Or worse, to make her suffer before extraction. She thought quickly. The academy had protocols against lethal training exercises. This was not authorized. Which meant someone wanted her dead and had arranged it to look like an accident. She gathered her gear and abandoned the cave immediately. Staying in one location was suicide now. Sarah moved through the jungle, using every skill her instructors had taught her. She varied her path, crossed streams to break her scent trail, and climbed trees to check her surroundings. By dawn, she had traveled 5 kilometers and found a new hiding spot in the hollow of a massive tree. She used the daylight to examine the area carefully. And that was when she found the second set of marks. Different claw patterns. A different species. This hunter had been tracking her from the east while the insectoid approached from the west. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. Not one hunter. Multiple. She spent the next hour scouting in careful circles, looking for more signs. She found them. Burn marks on vegetation from an energy weapon. Tracks from something bipedal with reversed knee joints. Shed scales from a creature she could not identify. Disturbed earth where something heavy had waited in ambush. 10 different trails. 10 different species. Sarah returned to her hollow and sat in silence. Her mind raced through possibilities. She could activate her emergency beacon, but if the hunters had inside help at the academy, the rescue team might arrive too late. Or not at all. She could run, but Cadet 7 was huge and she did not know the terrain. The hunters clearly did. Or she could fight. Humans had not climbed to the top of Earth's food chain by running from predators. They had done it by becoming better predators themselves. Sarah's ancestors had hunted mammoths with nothing but stone-tipped spears and patience. They had tracked prey across continents, following herds for weeks until their targets collapsed from exhaustion. Persistence hunting. That was the human advantage. Sarah began to smile. It was not a pleasant expression. These hunters thought they were tracking weak prey. They saw a small human cadet, alone and frightened. They did not understand what humans really were. She pulled out her knife and tested its edge. Then she began to plan. The insectoid would be first. Its tracks showed a fast metabolism, rapid movement, and overconfidence. It had approached her cave alone. That was its mistake. Sarah whispered to herself in the darkness of the hollow tree. They want a predator? I'll show them what evolution designed. She would not wait for rescue. She would hunt them instead. All 10 of them. And she would make sure the galaxy understood the price of underestimating humanity. The hunt had begun. Sarah spent the first night tracking the insectoid hunter. She did not sleep. Sleep was a luxury prey animals could not afford, but humans had evolved past that limitation. Her body could function on minimal rest for days if necessary. The insectoid, despite its speed and armor, needed regular rest periods. She had observed this in academy studies. High metabolism species burned energy quickly. She followed its trail through the jungle, staying downwind and moving silently. The creature was fast, covering ground in bursts of incredible speed, then stopping to scan for her. But it always stopped. Always rested. Sarah never stopped. She kept moving, kept the pressure constant. 14 hours into the pursuit, the insectoid's movements became erratic. It stumbled twice crossing a stream. Its rest periods grew longer. Sarah closed the distance, patient as death itself. At hour 16, the creature collapsed in a small clearing. Its breathing was rapid and shallow. Exhausted. Sarah emerged from the trees with her knife drawn. The insectoid saw her and tried to rise, but its legs would not support its weight. It made a chittering sound that might have been a question. Sarah answered by driving her knife into the gap between its head and thorax. The creature shuddered once and went still. She worked quickly with her blade. The skull was harder than expected, but she managed to separate it from the body. The chitinous trophy was light and sharp-edged. She tied it to her pack with cord made from vine fibers. Then she studied the corpse more carefully. The insectoid had bioluminescent glands in its thorax that produced natural camouflage. Sarah cut them free and stored them in her pack. Waste nothing. Use everything. That was the human way. She also found a communication device implanted behind the creature's eyes. Short-range transmitter. The other hunters would know their companion was dead. Good. Let them know. Let them understand they were not hunting prey anymore. Sarah used the insectoid's acidic blood to etch words into a nearby rock. Simple galactic standard. 9 left. Come find me. The next 2 hunters arrived together within 6 hours. They had tracked the insectoid's last position and found Sarah's message. She watched them from a tree branch 50 meters away. One was serpentine with wings, built for aerial superiority. The other was massive and ape-like, covered in thick fur and corded muscle. The brute. They were smart enough to work together. The flyer took to the sky while the brute searched the ground. Sarah had anticipated this. She had spent the last 6 hours preparing the ravine 200 meters south. Now she just needed to lead them there. She dropped a piece of her uniform onto the ground and moved. The brute found it within minutes and roared. The sound echoed through the jungle. The flyer screeched in response and dove toward the area. Sarah ran, making just enough noise to be followed but not so much that they would suspect a trap. She led them on a winding path through dense undergrowth, always moving toward the ravine. The brute crashed through the vegetation behind her, powerful but not particularly fast. The flyer circled overhead, screaming coordinates. Sarah reached the ravine and jumped. The gap was 4 meters across. Easy for a human in low gravity. She landed, rolled, and kept running. Behind her, the brute roared again and charged. It leaped. It did not make the distance. Sarah had calculated the brute's mass and jumping ability. Too heavy, too much momentum, insufficient leg strength for the gravity differential. The creature slammed into the far wall of the ravine and tumbled down into the river below. The current was strong, fed by distant waterfalls. The brute's heavy body sank immediately. The flyer shrieked in rage and dove at Sarah. She had been waiting for this. As the creature's talons extended toward her face, Sarah threw a weighted net she had woven from vines and insectoid silk. The net wrapped around the flyer's wings. It crashed hard, rolling across the ground. Sarah was on it before it could free itself. She had learned from studying the insectoid. These hunters wore light armor, relying on speed and natural weapons. Their joints were vulnerable. Her knife found the gap between the flyer's neck vertebrae. 2 kills in less than a minute. Sarah climbed down to the river carefully. The brute's body had washed up on a rocky bank 50 meters downstream. Drowned. She claimed both skulls, working methodically despite her exhaustion. The flyer's skull was hollow and light, designed for aerial maneuvers. The brute's was thick and heavy, built to withstand impacts. She secured them to her pack alongside the insectoid skull. 3 trophies. 3 dead hunters. But Sarah also claimed more useful prizes. The flyer had retractable claws made of a metal alloy stronger than her steel knife. She carefully removed 4 of them and fashioned handles using bone and fiber. Now she had weapons that could pierce armor. The brute's hide was nearly impenetrable. She cut away large sections to use as protective covering. Night fell as she finished her work. Sarah found a cave above the waterline and made camp. She allowed herself 4 hours of sleep, knowing the remaining 7 hunters would be regrouping and planning their next move. When she woke, she checked the communication device she had taken from the insectoid. It still functioned on passive receive mode. She listened to the hunters' chatter, translated automatically by the device's AI. They were arguing. Some wanted to abandon the contract. Others wanted revenge. One voice, calm and measured, quieted the others. The leader. A psychic species, based on the mental static Sarah could hear bleeding through the transmission. The leader's instructions were clear. The human is using persistence tactics and environmental advantages. She is not prey. She is a rival predator. We must approach her as such. Coordinate your attacks. Use your technology. Do not engage her alone. Sarah smiled in the darkness of her cave. They were learning. It would not save them. She spent the next day crafting better weapons and armor from her kills. The brute's hide became chest protection. The flyer's wing membrane became waterproof covering for her supplies. The insectoid's chitin became cutting edges for spears. And she took the bioluminescent glands and crushed them into paste. When darkness came, Sarah painted her face and arms with the glowing substance. In the jungle night, she would appear as a ghost, a demon, something beyond their understanding. She mounted the 3 skulls on stakes and planted them at the entrance to the ravine. A message for the remaining 7 hunters. A declaration. Sarah checked her weapons one final time and headed north, toward the coordinates where the hunters' transmissions originated. She was done running. Done defending. Now she would take the fight to them. 7 more skulls to claim. 7 more lessons to teach the galaxy about underestimating human predators. The jungle fell silent as she passed through it. Even the native creatures sensed something had changed. The prey had become the hunter. And the human was done playing games. Sarah tracked the remaining 7 hunters to a rocky outcrop 5 kilometers north of the ravine. She watched them from a distance, hidden in the upper branches of a massive tree. They had made camp in a defensible position with good sight lines. Smart. But they had also made a critical mistake. They had chosen terrain that limited their escape routes. The hunters were clearly on edge. 4 of them stood guard while 3 rested. Sarah recognized their species from Academy databases. A crystalline entity that could refract energy beams. Twin reptilian pack hunters with synchronized nervous systems. A blob-like creature that secreted paralyzing toxins. A shapeshifter with chameleonic skin. A cyborg with advanced targeting systems. And the leader, a tall humanoid with oversized cranium, the psychic. Sarah spent 6 hours observing their patterns. The twins never separated by more than 10 meters. The crystalline entity rotated guard duty with the cyborg. The toxin secretor stayed near the center of camp, probably their medic. The shapeshifter disappeared periodically, scouting the perimeter. The psychic remained still, probably scanning for mental signatures. She needed to separate them. Divide and conquer. Sarah began her plan at dusk. The first explosion came from the eastern perimeter. A simple device made from combustible plant sap and a spark from striking stones together. The blast was not large, but it was loud. The cyborg and crystalline entity immediately moved to investigate. The twins followed, weapons ready. Sarah had already circled to the western side of camp. The shapeshifter was there, scanning the jungle. It never saw her coming. She had coated herself in mud and local vegetation, masking her scent and heat signature. When she struck, it was with the insectoid's chitin blade, driven through what she hoped was the shapeshifter's primary heart. The creature shrieked and tried to morph into something defensive, but Sarah had already moved. She dragged the dying shapeshifter into the undergrowth and claimed its skull within minutes. 4 down. But the shriek had alerted the others. Sarah heard them shouting in multiple languages, converging on her position. She ran, leading them away from camp and toward the trap she had prepared. The jungle here was dense with thorny vines and deep pools of stagnant water. Sarah had spent the afternoon rigging the area with snares and pitfalls. She leaped over the first trip line. Behind her, the cyborg's targeting system should have detected it, but Sarah had learned something about technology. It failed in humid environments. Moisture corroded sensors. The cyborg's mechanical leg caught the vine. Spears made from the flyer's talon-tipped shafts swung from the trees. One punched through the cyborg's optical sensors. Another pierced its chest plating. The machine being stumbled backward into a pit Sarah had dug and lined with sharpened stakes. The crystalline entity arrived next, refracting light around itself for camouflage. But Sarah had anticipated this. She threw a handful of the bioluminescent paste at the creature. The glowing substance stuck to its surface, outlining its position perfectly. Sarah's spear, weighted with stones and thrown with human precision, shattered the entity's core structure. 2 more skulls claimed. 6 total. 4 hunters remained. Sarah did not wait to collect these trophies. The twins and the toxin secretor were close behind, and the psychic would be scanning for her thoughts. She needed to move fast and stay mentally blank. Fear and adrenaline could mask higher thought patterns. She let her training take over, acting on instinct rather than planning. The twins burst through the undergrowth, moving in perfect sync. One went left, one went right, attempting to flank her. Sarah had seen this tactic before in academy simulations. Pack hunters relied on coordination. Disrupt that coordination and they became vulnerable. She grabbed a burning branch from her supply cache and threw it at the left twin. The creature dodged, but the fire spread quickly in the dry undergrowth between them. A wall of flames separated the twins for the first time since they had started hunting her. Sarah heard one twin scream. The other screamed in response. Pain shared through their neural link. She used the confusion to attack the isolated twin, driving her knife into its throat. The creature fell, and 30 meters away, its sibling collapsed simultaneously. Neural shock through their connected systems. Sarah approached the second twin carefully. It was still alive but paralyzed from the feedback of its sibling's death. She ended its suffering quickly and claimed both skulls. 8 total. But she had made a mistake. She had forgotten about the toxin secretor. Pain exploded across her left arm as acidic venom splashed her skin. The blob-like creature had emerged from the shadows, expelling its weaponized secretions. Sarah rolled away, her arm burning like fire. She could already feel numbness spreading from the wound. The toxin secretor advanced, confident now. It had seen her kill 7 of its companions, but venom was its specialty. The human would be paralyzed within minutes, dead within an hour. Sarah's vision blurred. Her left arm hung useless at her side. But her right hand still worked. She reached into her pack and pulled out the jar she had prepared days ago. When she had killed the flyer by the ravine, she had noticed strange frogs in the water. Brightly colored. Poisonous. She had collected their skin secretions, remembering her academy training in toxicology. She smashed the jar on a rock and wiped her remaining blade through the frog venom. Then she threw the knife with her right hand, all of her remaining strength behind it. The blade caught the toxin secretor in what Sarah hoped was its brain cavity. The creature shuddered and began to dissolve, its own toxins breaking down its cellular structure from the inside out. A violent chemical reaction between the frog venom and the creature's biology. Sarah collapsed, breathing hard. Her left arm was completely numb now, the venom spreading. She pulled medical supplies from her pack with shaking hands. Tourniquet first, above the wound. Then she used her knife to make a shallow cut in her arm and squeezed, forcing the contaminated blood out. It was agony but necessary. She packed the wound with medicinal moss she had identified earlier, a natural antibiotic that grew near the water sources. Then she bandaged it tightly using strips from her uniform. The treatment was crude, but it would keep her alive long enough to finish what she started. Sarah claimed the toxin secretor's skull, working one-handed. 9 total now. Her collection was growing. She looked toward where the psychic leader had made camp. 1 hunter remained. The most dangerous one. The leader had not participated in the fighting. It had watched. Waited. Sarah cleaned her weapons and checked her remaining supplies. Her left arm would recover with time, but she did not have time. The psychic would know she was wounded. Vulnerable. Good. Let it think that. Humans had learned long ago that appearing weak was sometimes the best strategy. Predators grew overconfident when they sensed injured prey. Sarah stood on shaking legs and began walking toward the psychic's position. 1 more skull to claim. 1 more lesson to teach. Sarah's left arm throbbed with pain as she moved through the jungle toward the psychic's last known position. Dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. She had been on Cadet 7 for 5 days now. 5 days of constant hunting, minimal sleep, and brutal combat. Her body screamed for rest, but her mind remained sharp. That was the human advantage. The ability to push past physical limits when survival demanded it. She found the psychic's camp abandoned. The leader had moved, taking the 3 remaining hunters with it. Sarah examined the site carefully. 4 sets of tracks heading west toward a rocky plateau. They were not running. They were preparing an ambush. Sarah smiled grimly. She had expected this. The psychic had watched her kill 9 hunters. It knew her tactics now. Persistence. Traps. Using the environment. Turning the hunter's own abilities against them. The leader would try to negate those advantages by choosing the battlefield. She followed the tracks cautiously. Her left arm was regaining some feeling, though it still felt weak. The toxin was leaving her system slowly. She would need both arms for what came next. The plateau rose ahead of her, a flat expanse of rock with minimal cover. Perfect for ranged combat. Terrible for someone like Sarah who relied on stealth and close-quarters fighting. She circled the area, looking for alternative approaches. That was when the first energy blast nearly took her head off. Sarah dove behind a boulder as more shots followed. She had found them. Or rather, they had found her. She peeked around the rock and assessed the situation. 3 hunters spread across the plateau in a defensive formation. An energy weapons specialist with a plasma rifle. A heavily armored tank-like creature with projectile launchers. And a tall, multi-limbed being with bladed appendages that glowed with heat. The psychic was nowhere to be seen. Observing from a distance, probably. Studying her response. Sarah's mind raced through her options. Direct assault would be suicide. They had superior firepower and position. But she had something they did not. Experience. She had killed 9 of their companions by studying patterns and exploiting weaknesses. These 3 would have weaknesses too. The energy specialist fired in controlled bursts. Professional. Disciplined. But Sarah noticed it paused between shots. The weapon needed to recharge. 3 seconds between each blast. That was its limitation. The armored tank moved slowly, repositioning every 30 seconds. Heavy armor meant limited mobility. It would be vulnerable if isolated. The bladed hunter stayed close to the energy specialist. Protection detail. It moved with nervous energy, blades constantly shifting and adjusting. Overconfident in close combat. That was its weakness. Sarah pulled the crystalline entity's core fragments from her pack. She had saved them for exactly this reason. The fragments still held some refractive properties. She positioned them carefully on the rocks around her, angling them to catch the sunlight. When the energy specialist fired again, Sarah used the 3-second window to move. She sprinted to a new position, leaving the fragments behind. The next energy blast hit the fragments and scattered in multiple directions. Refracted light and energy created confusion. The bladed hunter reacted first, charging toward where it thought Sarah had gone. Mistake. Sarah had already circled behind it using the scattered light as cover. She had learned from fighting the twins. Coordination meant nothing if you could not see your target. Her spear, tipped with the flyer's metal talons, drove into the gap between the creature's shoulder blades. The bladed hunter shrieked and spun, its heated appendages slashing wildly. Sarah had anticipated this. She rolled under the attack and came up with her knife, driving it into the creature's leg joint. The hunter collapsed. Sarah did not wait to finish it. The energy specialist was already repositioning for a clear shot. She grabbed the dying bladed hunter and pulled it with her, using its body as a shield. Energy blasts scorched the air around her, but the hunter's thick hide absorbed most of the damage. The armored tank launched projectiles. Small explosive rounds that detonated on impact. Sarah felt the concussive force even behind her shield. Her ears rang. Her vision swam. But she kept moving, dragging the bladed hunter's corpse toward the tank. The energy specialist stopped firing. Risk of hitting its companion. Sarah used the moment to pull the heated blades from the dying hunter's appendages. The weapons burned her hands even through the brute's hide gloves, but she gritted her teeth and held on. She threw the first blade like a spear. It struck the energy specialist's weapon, melting the barrel. The specialist dropped the useless rifle and pulled a sidearm. Too slow. Sarah was already throwing the second blade. It caught the specialist in the chest, the superheated metal burning through flesh and bone. 2 down. 1 to go. The armored tank turned its full arsenal toward her. Sarah had nowhere to hide on the open plateau. She did what humans had always done when facing superior force. She adapted. The tank's armor was thick on the front and sides but thinner on top. Standard design for ground-based combat vehicles. Sarah ran directly at it, ignoring the projectiles that exploded around her. One caught her right leg, sending shrapnel into her calf. She stumbled but did not stop. At the last second she jumped. The low gravity helped her clear the tank's height. She landed on top of it and immediately drove her knife into the ventilation port she had spotted earlier. Armored creatures needed air circulation or they overheated in their own shells. The tank bucked and thrashed trying to throw her off. Sarah held on with her legs and worked the knife deeper. She could hear alarms inside the armor. Oxygen levels dropping. Temperature rising. The tank's hatch opened. The creature inside gasped for air. Sarah's knife found its throat before it could emerge fully. Silence fell across the plateau. Sarah slid off the tank's corpse and collapsed onto the rock. Her leg bled freely. Her hands were burned. Her left arm still ached from the venom. But she was alive. And 3 more hunters were dead. She claimed their skulls methodically, working through the pain. The bladed hunter's skull was segmented and sharp. The energy specialist was dense and compact. The tank's was massive and heavy. 12 skulls total now. Only 1 hunter remained. Sarah looked across the plateau and saw it. The psychic leader standing on a ridge 200 meters away. It had watched the entire battle. Studied her tactics. Analyzed her fighting style. Now it was walking toward her. Not running. Not attacking from range. Walking calmly, deliberately, as if it had all the time in the world. Sarah forced herself to stand. She picked up her weapons, each movement sending fresh waves of pain through her battered body. Her supplies were nearly exhausted. Her strength was fading. But she had come too far to quit now. The psychic stopped 50 meters away. Sarah could feel its mental presence pressing against her thoughts. A cold, analytical intelligence studying her like a specimen. Then it spoke, its voice echoing directly in her mind. You have proven yourself formidable, human. I offer you honorable combat. One predator to another. No tricks. No traps. Just skill and will. Sarah spat blood onto the rock and raised her knife. Come on then. Let's finish this. The psychic leader stood motionless as Sarah limped toward it. Her injuries screamed with every step, but she kept her knife steady and her eyes locked on her final opponent. This was the creature that had coordinated the entire hunt. The one that had hired 9 killers to murder a human cadet and make it look like an accident. You wish to know why I did this, the psychic said, its voice resonating in Sarah's skull. You wonder what you did to deserve such a fate. Sarah said nothing. She conserved her energy and watched for openings. You did nothing, the psychic continued. Your species did nothing. That is precisely the problem. Humans are weak, slow, fragile. You have no natural weapons. No armor. No special abilities. Yet the Academy treats you as equals to species that evolved under harsher conditions. I sought to prove what the galaxy already knows. Humans do not belong among warriors. Sarah stopped 10 meters away. Her leg throbbed where shrapnel had torn through muscle. Her burned hands could barely grip her knife. Her left arm still felt partially numb. She looked at the psychic, at its tall frame and oversized head, at the confidence in its posture. "You talk too much," Sarah said. The psychic's mental presence intensified. Sarah felt pressure behind her eyes, like fingers probing her thoughts. It was trying to read her mind, to predict her movements before she made them. That was how psychic species fought. They saw your intentions before you acted. Sarah remembered her training. Mental discipline. Focus. But also chaos. The human mind was not like other species. Humans could hold contradictory thoughts simultaneously. They could plan multiple strategies and choose between them in fractions of a second. Psychic struggled with that unpredictability. She thought about attacking left while planning to dodge right, while remembering the taste of her mother's cooking, while calculating the wind speed, while singing an old Earth song in her head. A storm of thoughts, all equally intense, all equally meaningless. The psychic staggered. Its mental probe recoiled from the chaos in Sarah's mind. Sarah attacked. She closed the distance in 3 steps and slashed with her knife. The psychic blocked with its forearm, revealing a natural bone ridge she had not seen before. Her blade scraped across it harmlessly. The creature's other hand shot forward in a palm strike aimed at her chest. Sarah twisted, letting the blow glance off her ribs instead of hitting her heart. Pain exploded through her torso, but she used the momentum to spin and kick at the psychic's knee. Her boot connected. The joint bent slightly but did not break. They separated, circling each other. The psychic's mental presence pressed harder now, trying to force its way into Sarah's thoughts. She felt it like a weight on her consciousness, crushing down, demanding submission. "Your mind is strong," the psychic admitted, "but your body is failing. I can feel your pain. Every injury. Every broken piece of you. Surrender now and I will make your death quick." Sarah laughed. It hurt her ribs to laugh, but she did it anyway. "You don't understand humans at all." She attacked again, this time with no strategy. Pure aggression. She slashed high, then low, then stabbed forward. The psychic blocked and dodged, its superior reflexes keeping it safe. But Sarah was not trying to hit it. She was testing its patterns, learning its rhythm. The psychic counterattacked with a kick that caught Sarah in her injured leg. She went down hard, rolling across the rocky ground. The psychic advanced, confident now. It raised its hand for a finishing strike. Sarah threw a handful of dirt and small rocks directly at the creature's oversized eyes. The psychic flinched. Just for a second. But a second was all Sarah needed. She surged upward from the ground and drove her knife into the psychic's chest. Not deep. The bone-ridged structure protected most of its vital organs. But deep enough to hurt. Deep enough to shock. The psychic's mental attack exploded outward in a wave of psychic pain and rage. Sarah felt it crash into her mind like a tsunami. Every fear she had ever felt, every painful memory, every doubt and insecurity magnified 1,000 times. She saw herself dying alone on this alien world. She saw her failure, her weakness, her insignificance. And then she embraced it. Pain was an old friend to humans. Suffering was part of their evolution. Sarah's ancestors had endured ice ages, plagues, starvation, and endless predators. They had learned that pain was not the enemy. Pain was information. Pain meant you were still alive, still fighting. She pushed through the psychic assault and drove her knife deeper. The psychic gasped, its mental attack faltering. Sarah pulled the blade out and stabbed again. And again. Each strike fueled by every human who had ever been told they were too weak, too slow, too fragile. The psychic fell to its knees. Blood, a strange purple color, poured from its wounds. It looked up at Sarah with something that might have been respect or might have been fear. "How?" it whispered, both verbally and mentally. "How do you continue? Your body is broken. Your pain should be unbearable. How do humans endure what would destroy any other species?" Sarah knelt beside the dying creature. "Because we learned to millions of years ago. When we were prey on our own world, running from things bigger and stronger and faster than us. We learned that the one who gives up dies. The one who keeps going lives. It's that simple." The psychic's eyes dimmed. "Then humans are more dangerous than I understood. Not despite your weakness, but because of it. You evolved as prey and became predators anyway. Remember that," Sarah said. "When you broadcast your final words to the Academy. Tell them what you learned." The psychic's hand moved to a device on its chest. A recorder. Still transmitting. It had been documenting the entire hunt. "Do not underestimate humans," it said, voice fading. "They do not hunt for sport. They hunt to survive. And they always finish." The hunt. The psychic died. Sarah claimed its skull, working slowly with her damaged hands. 13 total now. Wait, no. Whoa. She counted again. The insectoid, the brute, the flyer, the shapeshifter, the cyborg, the crystalline entity, the twins, the toxin secretor, the bladed hunter, the energy specialist, the tank, and the psychic. 13 skulls. But the hunt was for 10 predators. Sarah's exhausted mind struggled to make sense of it. Then she understood. The psychic had hired 10 hunters plus itself. Plus 2 more she had not accounted for initially. No. She counted her trophies again carefully. 10 skulls. She had miscounted in her exhaustion. 10 predators. All dead. Sarah activated her emergency beacon. The signal would reach the academy within hours. Rescue would come by tomorrow. She had survived. She arranged the 10 skulls in a circle around her and sat in the center, weapons ready. If anyone else wanted to try their luck, she was prepared. But the jungle remained quiet. Even the native predators seemed to sense that something more dangerous than them now ruled this territory. The rescue ship arrived 18 hours later. The human instructors found Sarah unconscious but alive, surrounded by her trophies. The alien instructors stood in silence, staring at the skulls. At the evidence of what a single human cadet had accomplished. The psychic's recording was recovered and broadcast throughout the academy. Every species watched as Sarah hunted and killed 10 of the galaxy's most dangerous predators with nothing but primitive weapons and human endurance. The academy restructured its entire training program. Humans were no longer given extreme difficulty exams. Instead, they were classified as apex persistence predators and given specialized training to refine their natural abilities. Sarah graduated top of her class. The 10 skulls were mounted in the Academy Museum with a plaque that read, "The Price of Underestimation." She stood before them on graduation day, her injuries healed but her scars remaining. A reminder of what she had endured. What she had proven. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humans did not climb to the top of their food chain by being the biggest or the fastest or the strongest. They did it by being the most relentless. The most adaptable. The most unwilling to quit. They hunted not with claws or fangs, but with intelligence and endurance. And once a human decided you were prey, there was nowhere in the galaxy you could hide. Sarah touched each skull as she passed, honoring the creatures that had taught her this truth. Then she walked out into the galaxy, ready to show them what a human persistence predator could really do.